Today we have with us Captain Ashok Shirur. Sir is an ex-air defense officer and has been in the information security domain for three or decades. He consults and works with a lot of Fortune 500 companies and also a lot of government public sector undertakings. He is almost a pioneer in the cybersecurity, information security industry in India, I would say. And today we have had some discussions with him with respect to the cybersecurity landscape. And today what we are going to cover is as to some particular specifics, or we'll take a deep dive into the cybersecurity, information security from more transactional point of view in today's discussion. So thank you again for your time and joining us today, sir.
Good evening and thank you.
Sir, I would like to understand, sir, what are the typical technologies and tools you find most valuable in your tasks?
So, if I were to name the top solutions that we normally propose in organizations for bringing high levels of information security, so first would be the vanilla term for the solution is firewalls. But if you look at it a little more in detail, they are called UTMs or NGFW. So UTMs would be Unified Threat Management Solutions, or NGFW would be Next Generation Firewalls. So these would be comprehensive perimeter security solutions. Then you would need anti-malware solutions. Again, they would now be termed as EDR or XDR solutions. Anti-malware solutions typically sit on desktops and servers and protect against different kinds of malware. Then you have endpoint protection platforms, which are for protection against things other than malware. Things like application hijacks, things like containerization of critical information, sensitive information on the endpoints, including smartphones. So then there are these endpoint security platforms. Then you have something called as SIEM, Security Information and Event Management. So these are comprehensive tools which collect information and logs from various security and network components, and then become a single pane of glass to try and infer what is happening on the network from a security perspective. And if you look at the newer implementations of SIEM, it gives you a lot of proactive suggestions on what to do when there is what kind of an outage on the network. But I would, if you look at it from a ease of implementation or from a force multiplication perspective, I would suggest a solution called NET. The abbreviation is NAC, NAC. It could either expand to network admission control or network access control. But this is an extremely strong tool. It's a real force multiplier as far as the information security teams are concerned. It allows you to control every machine on the network sitting out of band. And in case there is any machine on the network which is misbehaving, without having to do much, without actually going to the end machine, it's possible for you to do various kinds of things to mitigate the situation. Then you have identity and access management. At times they're also called PIM or PAM, privilege, identity management, privilege, access management. So these are tools to manage the identity and the access permissions and the authorization for access to the network, access to the various applications on the network, access to the various websites. Then you have data leak prevention solutions or information rights management solutions, which protect information from being leaked, from being misappropriated, from the crown jewels, from the intellectual property of an organization getting stolen. Then you use encryption tools, tools which encrypt the data so that they cannot be accessed by people who are not authorized to access the data. Then you have vulnerability management solutions, which help you evaluate what are the various vulnerabilities across the network, how to mitigate those vulnerabilities, what are the solutions available to mitigate those vulnerabilities. Then you have web application firewalls, especially if you have a internet-facing part of your organization. You would need to consider web application firewalls so that your public face is continuously monitored, continuously safeguarded against all kinds of possible information security challenges. And then you need a security awareness training platform, a platform which helps you run campaigns on phishing, on passwords, on thumb drives, etc., etc. and maybe an incident response and a forensic tool, something that helps you manage incident response and also gives you the tools that you require for subsequent analysis, for recording the entire situation post facto, and tools so that it helps you understand how to avoid those kinds of situations in future.
Right. Okay. So last two questions. Now, from what I understand, there are a lot of things to be done, and it continues to evolve. The industry continues to evolve. So your team, you, and for any professional, what would you suggest? Should they be? How do they upskill continuously? Are there any formal accreditation certifications, or is it on the job? How is it typically suggested?
So I would say that, it is a mix. Frankly, it is a mix. So yes, there are many, industry standard certifications that are available. So you have certifications like CompTIA, you have EC Council, you have, CISSP, CISA, you have CEH, Certified Ethical Hacking, you have CompTIA Security Plus, etc., etc. So there are a lot of industry standard certifications that are available, but these are very generic in nature. More importantly, one needs to go for vendor specific training. So for example, if say a security professional works with say a FortiGate firewall, so then the vendor specific training for how best to implement or configure the Fortinet firewall to protect and prevent different kinds of information security threats becomes very critical. So other than the generic industry standard certifications, vendor specific training is also needed. Now, vendor specific training gets augmented when you also participate in conferences and events. So in a conference or in an event, what happens is there are a lot of seminars, there are a lot of workshops where one can gain insights into the latest trends, technologies, and the best practices. You get to interact with a lot of professionals, you get to network, you learn from different people's experience. Everyone would come up with what they have gone through, what they've done about a situation that they've faced. So this fosters the concept of knowledge exchange. So that's important. Then there are a lot of these online courses and training programs. So you have things like Coursera, EDX, Udacity, so many of these. Most of them are free, some of them are paid. But these courses are self-paced, your time, and they're led by industry experts. And they cover a wide variety of topics. It could be cybersecurity principles or it could be advanced topics. And especially when they are free and they're self-paced, it becomes like a constant learning platform for professionals. And lastly would be webinars like this one, this kind of a webinar that you all are attending. It gives you the exposure and an opportunity to interact with different professionals who may have different expertise, whether it is years of experience, whether it is different situations that they've experienced, and what have they done and what have they done to protect or prevent. Lastly, reading. There's no shortcut to reading, whether it is industry publications, whether it is blogs, whether it is simple Google. There are these interesting sites. So, even I don't come from an educated background, so my tutor has been Google to a large extent. And there are these sites like How Stuff Works, for example. There's a very nice site called How Stuff Works. So you just put something there, how does SSL work or how does email work, and it tells you. So little nuggets of information which are critical to fundamental understanding of information technology and security, you're able to gain out of these interactions.
Awesome. Sir, one last question for this part of our discussion. What would be the typical KPIs on which you would like to be audited or are audited by your principals?
Okay, so what happens is you have metrics that are defined for business measurement. You have key performance indicators, you have key result areas, etc., that are defined for various areas of business. Similarly, for information security, it's possible to define metrics. So one metric, for example, could be the incident response metric. So what was the incident detection and response time? One needs to be able to measure the time it took from the point of detection to the point of response to a particular security incident. And the lower the response time indicates that it was more effective. The response plan was more effective. So that becomes one metric. Another metric could be the phishing simulation metric. So when you run a phishing campaign on a user base, what was the percentage of the users that click through? What are the percentage of users that, other than having clicked through, actually put their credentials? So the metrics become very simple to infer from there. So if, for example, out of 1,000 end users, 200 end users went ahead and put their credentials, it means that the posture for the phishing simulation was a success, and the posture for the organization was very poor. Then the vulnerability management metric, so if you run a routine vulnerability management scan across an organization or a network, and you identify what is the time that it takes for you to patch vulnerabilities once it has been identified, the shorter time becomes the more favorable. That becomes another interesting metric. Once you identify that patch management is critical in the security of an organization, the identification of the time that it takes to address the vulnerability that's been detected with a patch becomes your metric for that particular measure. Then the compliance metric, so like I said, there are these legal and regulatory compliance requirements. So one can do a compliance evaluation from a legal, from a regulatory, or from a security policy compliance perspective. So monitoring the adherence to the security policies, to the procedures, using regular audits or assessments gives you the answer that you need, the metric that you need for evaluation. Then the user awareness and training metric. So this could be in the form of gamified tests that are thrown to users. One could be the simple completion. The training completion becomes one metric to evaluate whether the employee actually completed the security awareness training or not. And second is the effectiveness training. So once you train the user on, for example, say phishing simulation, and then you run a phishing campaign, and then you still see that after the training also there is 20% of users who are still clinging through. So that gives you the metric of what has been the effectiveness of the training. Then there is the access control metric. So you evaluate the user access reviews, you evaluate the frequency and effectiveness of user access, and the number of times that there was an attempt of an incorrect access. How many times did the privilege need to get elevated? How many unauthorized access attempts were made? And then you have security awareness surveys. So these could be simple paper surveys to evaluate the employee's understanding of security practices. And this is more from a culture perspective. This is not as much from an awareness perspective. This is more from a culture, the organization culture towards security as a priority for the organization. Last would be the risk management metric. So there are there could be many more. There could be budget and resource metrics. There could be technology specific metrics. It depends on the organization. What is it that the organization wants to measure? What are the areas that the organization wants to measure with respect to the information security? Those metrics can accordingly be thrown up.
Thank you so much for this, sir. I believe that the audience would be able to draw how to go about developing a career in the cybersecurity, and if they have to be on the services provider side, then what they can do in terms of the matrices and all they need to follow for being able to implement the cybersecurity protocols. Thank you so much for your time, sir.